staying at the historic Anderson House Hotel. Opened in 1856, this beautiful hotel offers comfortable accommodations, has a delicious restaurant, and even a speakeasy in the basement to unwind with a drink. Located next to the Mississippi River and on Main Street, there is a lot of sightseeing and shopping to do too. To get more information, go to theandersonhousehotel.com. Greg Bakun here. I've been talking for a while about how spooky, fun, and fascinating the Minneapolis Trolley Tours are, but now there's big news. The Candlelight Ghost Tours now begin at the historic Pillsbury Club, a beautifully restored haunted mansion once owned by Charles Pillsbury himself. Believe it or not, the interior is nearly 200 years older than the exterior. How is that possible? You'll have to come out and find out. Before or after your tour, stop by the on-site market featuring a curated collection of handmade goods, artisan crafts, and locally inspired treasures. Perfect for picking up a keepsake to remember your haunting adventure. You'll also find exclusive spooky merchandise from Tales of the Crypt and Elvira. Then, climb aboard the climate-controlled trolley as we travel through Minneapolis's haunted hotspots, uncovering ghost stories that locals would rather keep buried. The mansion is restored to perfection, and there is no better way to spend an evening. Visit MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for tickets and more information.
With your AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lilia. Tonight, clear with a low of 6 below, then Thursday, sunshine with a high of 9. There's something for everybody at Cafe Latte in St. Paul, from award-winning soup, salad, sandwiches, and desserts to treats from the bakery made fresh daily and a pizza and wine bar. Cafe Latte is located on the corner of Grand Avenue and Victoria Street. Check them out at cafelatte.com.
Portions of the following program may be pre-recorded.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story. This is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're going to have a really interesting program, and I'm going to get to that in a second. Meanwhile, in Prairie over at AM 950, we have Adam. How are you doing tonight, Adam?
Trying to thaw out, real feel of -9 with our low temperature going on right now of like -4, just trying to stay warm, twirling some sticks together, trying to get a spark going here. Same old, same old.
I'm starting to get sick of hearing Patrick, to be perfectly honest. Every time I hear him, all he's talking about is this below, that below, all that stuff. And I've had enough of it. And I'm going to have to talk to him tomorrow when I get to the station, tell him to stop telling us about, 6 below zero. I don't want to hear it anymore. I'm sick and tired of it.
Yeah, I'm kind of over all the bad news Patrick gives us.
Patrick does he's kind of a downer, isn't he?
He really is. He really is. He's Mr. Eeyore of AM 950, where every time you hear his voice, it's going to be freezing outside. No. We're going to put a stop to that tomorrow. I guarantee by next week it's going to be better temperatures. That's our promise to you out there. That's all I'm going to say. So tonight, and Adam, I know that this is one that you've been very excited about as well. It's going to be a very interesting program, and I'm so excited who we have talking with us tonight, because clearly the right person for it. We're in Minnesota, and I was just talking to our guest about this, and over the course of the past 5 years doing the show on AM 950, we've never spoken about this topic before, especially since it's actually connected deeply to this state. The Minnesota Iceman is something of lore that goes back to the 60s. And we're going to talk about it tonight, every aspect of it. And our guest tonight is William Jevning, and he wrote the book, The Minnesota Iceman, that is available on Amazon. He's also written 9 other books. He's working on another one. There's going to be a lot of great stuff that's coming out
through the organization that he has started, that he's working with. We're going to talk about that more extensively in the second segment, so that he can explain it in his way, so that people know how to follow and people know what to look forward to, because there's a lot of great stuff going on there. Our guest tonight is author William Jevning, and we're going to spend the hour talking about the Minnesota Iceman. William, welcome to GhostBox Radio.
Hello, glad to have you. Glad you have me. I'm sorry, there's
glad.
A dog in the other room barking.
I wasn't sure if it was the Minnesota Iceman coming to visit.
You never know.
I never know. I never know. It's funny, actually, because Chad, who owns the station, he has a little dog named Mia, just cute. And then today, I don't know what he does. If he kidnaps these dogs, or if he's dog sitting, I don't know. There's always, once every like 3 months, there's like a new dog in the office as well. And this one was big. It named Duke, and I looked at Duke, and Duke is over 100 pounds and black. And I looked at Duke and I said, I recognize you from the Patterson Gimlin film, because he wasn't walking on, he wasn't bipedal, but I mean, still, he's pretty big. So the book, once again, is called The Minnesota Iceman. This is something that we're going to really get into. William, why don't we just start from the beginning here? I mean, what is the Minnesota Iceman?
Well, there was information floating around about this for quite a long time, different pieces here and there. And I can't remember if it was Argosy magazine or one of those back in the 60s that first printed Frank Hansen's account. And Frank Hansen was an Air Force captain stationed in the Duluth area back at that time. And how the story went was that him and some friends went hunting. He shot a deer, didn't kill it. It ran off. So he pursued the deer, wanting to make sure that it wasn't suffering and all that. So he did follow the deer, followed the blood trail, and he came upon 3 of these man-like creatures, hairy man-like creatures. And he said the 3 of them were drinking the dead deer's blood. So 2 of them, they all saw him. 2 of them ran off. The third one charged him, and he shot it, and he wasn't sure if he killed it or not, but he took off running. And it bothered him for about 2 weeks. So he went back to see, what had happened, and he found the creature frozen solid. And of course, being in Minnesota, of course, about how cold it is there in the wintertime. So it's not unusual for something to be frozen solid after it was killed. So he decided, without telling his wife, and he was living on base, to take the creature home, and took it into the basement, took all the meat out of the freezer and put the creature in the freezer. And then over the course of I don't know how long it was, he noticed that the skin was drying out and becoming kind of jerky like. So he filled the freezer with water, and that's how it ended up in a block of ice. And after he retired, of course, he couldn't talk about it because he wasn't sure if he killed something that was related to human beings, or what the situation was. So he decided after he retired from the Air Force, he took it out and kind of did tours, did shows with it. And that's kind of the gist of the story. So he brought it around, and he took it to places, and people were able to see whatever this was. Right.
So when he finally took it out on tour, so to speak, what did he think it was?
He wasn't sure. Actually, the Smithsonian sent 2 guys out, Bernard Heuvelmans and Ivan Sanderson. Sanderson was a zoologist, and a lot of listeners might know who he was. He wrote a lot of books about the early books on what people call cryptids.
Yeah.
But he was a zoologist, and Heuvelmans was I can't remember exactly what his degree was. He was like a primatologist, essentially. I'm probably off on that, so hopefully people won't skewer me on that one. But they were qualified scientists. They examined it.
He was a zoologist, wasn't he?
I believe so. Yeah. They examined it through the ice.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not the best circumstances to examine a specimen, but it was privately owned. So they did what they could, and they said it was real. They said it was real. And there were other people contacted me later. And the reason I decided to write the book was, number one, to put all of this disjointed information that was out there into one source, but also to add in things people were privately telling me that they knew from being there and witnessing it themselves. Things like, and there were some strange things that went on during that time too, but I'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
They saw it through the ice where urine had come out of the creature's penis into the ice or into the water before it froze. There were traces of blood that came out of where it was shot, things like that. And the ice had a bad smell to it.
Yeah.
So he was touring this thing around, and somehow word got to him that the FBI might be looking into this. So he took it across the Canadian border. And of all the people that got him back across the border was former Vice President Walter Mondale when he was state senator at that time. So he got him to come back. And then there were some rumors that Jimmy Stewart, of all people, was actually involved in this and ended up with ownership. And there was a duplicate made of this creature and put in ice. So that's why there was a lot of stories that it was later on thought to be a hoax and all this stuff, because they said, oh, well, this is the fake. And all this was done partly to cover Hansen, but also, we don't know what the characters behind the scenes were doing that ended up with ownership of this. In fact, the last time, and I did some searching around and people contacting me, there was a lady in California who reached out to me a few years back, and she said she was actually taken to a storage unit. Apparently the guy she was seeing had some connection to it and was showing off. So he took her to this storage unit where it was kept, and it was still there, a little bit less ice than what it originally was, but the creature was still there. Anything beyond that, we don't know. It's a mystery.
It's so when you say it's a mystery, we don't know 100% for certain if it's a hoax or not.
That's true, but I think the original story was pretty much honest. I think Hansen was honest. I mean, he was an Air Force captain, so I'm a veteran, so usually military officers aren't in the habit of lying. Typically, I mean, there are exceptions, but I think he was being honest. I think things got clouded later on as other people started getting their hands in the mix. But I've talked to quite a number of people that actually saw it for themselves, and again, almost all of them said that the ice smelled almost of rotting flesh and things like that. So I don't really have any reason to believe that he wasn't being honest.
Right. And I suppose if you were to really thaw out that ice so someone could properly look at it, it's the end game for whatever it is, right? There is no going back at that point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Then you got one on the slab. Yeah,
that's so I mean, I understand where that's a problem. And the two scientists that looked at this Iceman, they're very well respected, and there's no reason to not believe what they have to say. And like you said, they were looking through the ice, which isn't ideal, but at the same time, what else are you going to do about that?
Right. And what are the problems? Sanderson, I think, passed away not too long after all that, so he wasn't around to discredit, but people went out of their way to discredit Hoovelmans, and I never quite understood that. Of course, when I first learned about it, after my own first encounter with two of these creatures, I met some of the people who were famous in the topic, two in particular, Renee DeHinden and John Green, out of British Columbia. And, I was 17 when I met those guys, so I pretty much believed everything they told me. And they didn't have a great deal to say about that, but they didn't personally think much of Hoovelmans, but they never articulated why they didn't think much of him. So I didn't really pay attention to it till many years later.
Now, the stuff that I read about it beyond your book, a lot of places are classing it as a hoax. You are looking at it as we don't know. Why do you think that most people are moving over to the hoax side of things on this?
Well, the body that was fabricated was actually sold a number of years back. So now everybody's saying, oh, well, look, see, there's the hoax body, but they don't take into account the whole story. And that's kind of the problem with this topic in general is there's a lack of common sense being applied to it. And people will sort of vote with their gut instead of really kind of digging into details. And the circumstances of the story were very similar. And I've interviewed thousands of witnesses over the years. I've done this since I was 14. So I've done this for 53 years now, dating myself. And there's commonality. I mean, and you would expect that with a living species of animal, there would be very similar kinds of behaviors and so forth. And the fact that the three creatures were approximately the same size, the same description. And I know a number of anthropologists, and we all kind of agree that, and this is kind of a twist too, we think that the Minnesota Iceman creatures may not even be a Bigfoot creature.
Yeah.
It may be another relic hominid.
Interesting. I mean, yeah.
And it's because of, morphological differences and things. I mean, the Bigfoots are, they're larger and some of the characteristics are different. And I've had moose hunters send me, fresh footprints they found out in the wilds, moose hunting. The footprints are a little bit different. Yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things in the back of my mind. I don't know, but I leave the question open.
Now, am I correct in saying that whatever is currently considered the sideshow for people to see the fake or whatever, that's over at the Museum of the Weird in Austin, Texas, or is that no longer the case?
I don't know where it is currently. I just know that somebody bought it, and I didn't really pay attention to the mock-up that was made. I mean, I figured somebody bought that. Okay, that's fine and well. And that's kind of, I mean, if anybody wanted to sideline the topic, there you go. That's a way to make most people think it's a hoax. And there were false stories that were planted too. Like, the creature was actually from Southeast Asia and was floating in the ocean on a block of ice. And that was total nonsense. Nonsense.
Interesting. Cause I remember reading that and you had mentioned that in the book that you read that. Yeah. Really, really interesting stuff. Why don't we go ahead, though, and do this? I want to go ahead, take our first break. When we come back, we're going to deep dive into this a little bit more. Folks, if you have any questions, put it in the comments, or you feel free to give us a call, 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Are you one of thousands of individuals who know you have psychic abilities but don't know how to tap into your higher self? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who offers classes that can help you reach your goals. Refined Divine holds classes Monday and Thursday at her 2 locations and via Zoom. Classes consist of manifestation, learning psychic abilities, shadow work, and healing trauma. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
This is Psychic Medium Deb. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. I've been talking for a while about how spooky, fun, and fascinating the Minneapolis trolley tours are. But now there's big news. The Candlelight Ghost Tours now begin at the historic Pillsbury Club, a beautifully restored haunted mansion once owned by Charles Pillsbury himself. Believe it or not, the interior is nearly 200 years older than the exterior. How is that possible? You'll have to come out and find out. Before or after your tour, stop by the on-site market featuring a curated collection of handmade goods, artisan crafts, and locally inspired treasures. Perfect for picking up a keepsake to remember your haunting adventure. You'll also find exclusive spooky merchandise from Tales of the Crypt and Elvira. Then climb aboard the climate-controlled trolley as we travel through Minneapolis's haunted hotspots, uncovering ghost stories that locals would rather keep buried. The mansion is restored to perfection, and there is no better way to spend an evening. Visit MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for tickets and more information. Greg Bakun here. It's nice to get out of the Twin Cities and take some travel excursion to some great locations. Minnesota has so much to offer, which is why I love traveling down to Wabasha and staying at the historic Anderson House Hotel. Opened in 1856, this beautiful hotel offers comfortable accommodations, has a delicious restaurant, and even a speakeasy in the basement to unwind with a drink. Located next to the Mississippi River and on Main Street, there is a lot of sightseeing and shopping to do too. To get more information, go to the AndersonHouseHotel.com. Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. And we are just 1 week away from Ghost Stories and Beyond in Anoka over at Billy's, as we do the first Wednesday of every month. This month for February, we're going to be talking about pets in the afterlife. If you have a story about a pet that has visited you after they had passed, come on out, talk about it. Let's share some stories and what it may be a very emotional evening. It'll be a lot of fun, though. Billy's is also a great place for burgers, half-price burgers at night. $10 to get in. Definitely come on out, say hello, share a story, and we'll have a good night about it. Now, Adam, I suppose you're just like super excited that finally we got someone on the show that actually has a radio voice.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. I don't have to sit here and mess with the dials. It's nice to have someone who actually enunciates and talks into the microphone.
You know, I know. We're gonna be offering William a job here at the end of the show. So, you know,
I had a friend years ago that told me I should be doing voiceovers. She said, "You have a great radio voice." And another guy, he always he comes on the show. He has a show on the East Coast, and he says, I have the smooth jazz voice.
You do. You really do. You know, it reminds me when I first started in broadcasting, and I was over at a small station in Mankato, KUIC, and they had one guy there. All these stations always have one person who has like the perfect voice. And me being naive, I'm just like, did anyone ever tell you that you have a great voice? And he would just play it up. He like, really? And I'm like, yeah, you should really try to, get into more voiceover. Oh, really? I haven't thought about that. Oh, yeah. No, you absolutely. Like I'm giving this guy, I'm not even 21. I'm 20 years old. I'm giving this guy, a lot of great advice. And he's just, you could tell he's just like you don't. Our guest tonight is author William Jevning. We are talking about the Minnesota Iceman, and Carol in the comments, she says that great show. Never heard about the Minnesota Iceman, so I'm glad that we are talking about it. Before we get back to that subject, though, William, I want you to talk about some of the other stuff that you have going on. You've written a number of books. You have a research group. You have some programs and stuff coming out. Would you mind just sharing some of that? Get people really excited for what's coming on for you.
Yeah, I'm actually. People tell me I'm the busiest guy in podcasting because I have two shows that go out daily. Of course, a YouTube channel with around 1,500 shows on there. The big thing now, I've kind of gone to. Of course, I'm working on my 11th book, and I have a friend in Hollywood who's actually part of my field team, and we sort of inadvertently got starting to make documentary films. 2 of them are out already. We're working on the next 2 now, and we probably got another 20 planned. But and we created a 10-part TV series from our trip to the Navajo Reservation last year, and that's been licensed by a couple of distribution companies, so it's going to be available here very soon, and it turned out really good. So we're busy. I mean, if people want to go to that website and see what's there, it's a new one that Adam created. It's called, all one word, JevningResearchGroup.com. And that's got links to my books. That has, to the different podcasts, not just mine, but some people who I think are pretty good in the topic. There's a lot of people I don't think are any good on the topic, but the people that are on the website, like Subarctic Sasquatch in Alaska, Fred's really good. He's a good friend of mine. And there's a couple others on there. So that's sort of the main. You can go to that site and kind of see everything we're doing. It has the links to the films up there and everything too. So I keep busy.
It sounds like it. And anyone who does any of the stuff that we're talking about, what we're doing here, you just can't let it just ride. You have to be on it every day. You have to be really pushing it. There is nothing easy about what you're doing to get people to stay captivated and focused on your work. It's not easy. That's for sure.
That is true. Plus, there's so much distraction out there. The subject of Bigfoot has everybody that's got an opinion, they think they're an expert. And one of the things that I've been set aside apart is because I do it from a common sense approach. I mean, I've seen the creatures 2 different occasions, 14 years apart, and numerous other near experiences. And that's something we can talk about if you want to another time or whatever. But,
absolutely.
We try to keep things on an even keel. There's nothing extraordinary about these things. They're just another creature out there, and the Minnesota Iceman fits into that. Everything about that was, there's no portals, there's no things like that. It's all very flesh and blood. Nothing that shouldn't be expected. And we use a lot of primate comparisons. They're a primate, and they do things that are very similar to other primates. Almost all their behaviors. It's nothing out of the ordinary.
Absolutely. Adam, first of all, thank you for putting that URL into all the chats. Really appreciate that. We've got a question in the comments. Robert Pilot, who does Native Roots Radio here on AM 950, airs weeknights 5 to 6. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, it's a fantastic program. He asked the question, what did you do at the Navajo Nation?
Well, we have a good friend who's Navajo, and he had been telling us about the things that were going on there. So he invited us to go there. So we went there a year ago in October and spent 11 days. And I think everybody we talked to, and we talked to a lot of folks there, had seen the creatures at least once. Even the Navajo police told us where to go look. It was really quite an experience. And when we found a lot of evidence while we're there, one of the funny incidences was Don, our Navajo friend, he got a text one night, and we were getting ready to turn in at the hotel we were staying at. And I believe in staying in the hotel. I stay out of the creatures' feeding areas at night. That way they'll continue doing what they're doing. So he got a text that up northern Arizona that about 2 hours away from us, there was some screaming going on. So we said, well, we need some of that on tape. So we spent the 2 hours driving up there, waited around about an hour, never heard anything. You couldn't get a hold of the people anymore. So we decided to call it a night. So we drive the other 2 hours back to Window Rock, Arizona. And that's the capital of the Navajo reservation, but it's a really small town. And right across the highway from us, about 1,000 yards, there was this mesa. And I was back in my room 8 minutes. I looked at my watch, and I say 8 minutes because we all laugh about it still. The guys texted me and they said, you need to come out here right now. So I put my boots on and I walk out the door, and I didn't even get to the door, and I hear this howling that was blasting through the wall. It was so loud. And we recorded it for over an hour. And then if you know who Thinker Thunker is on YouTube, Adam sent him, I think, a minute of the recording, of the hour recording. And he did a graphic analysis of it, and it clearly shows it's no other animal that's known to that region. And that's actually in the first episode of the, we call it Bigfoot Navajo Nation, the TV series.
An hour is an extraordinary long time. That's incredible.
And the locals are all telling us, oh yeah, they come down here and give us, they give us heck about every 2 or 3 days. It was no big deal to them. It was just normal business as usual. They were honking horns and doing things trying to get it to shut up, actually. But it's all very matter of fact to them.
Have you run into any of their structures at all, like trees being bent and that sort of thing?
I'll tell you something about the trees, the broken trees.
Yeah.
I'm actually the first one that put that out. That I found, and this goes back actually to the 80s. And I don't know if any you know who Bob Titmus was. He was, he was the big guy in the Bluff Creek area along with the others back in the 60s. But I was at his house one time, and he was taking me around, and he was showing me, he had all these piles of what to me looked like just small branches or big twigs. They were maybe an inch thick, and they were snapped over. And there was maybe 10 or so in each pile. And he had, I don't know, half a dozen piles in his house. And I said, what are those? And he said, well, I can't remember the other guy. He was in one of John Green's book. Green wrote it. They were following a 15-inch set of Bigfoot tracks one time. And he said periodically they'd find these trees where they'd find this, branch that was broken and twisted over on itself. So he says, I don't know, maybe they're just walking along doing this. So I didn't really think much of it. It didn't impress me.
Yeah.
I thought, well, anybody could do that. But I just kept it in the back of my mind. I do that with stuff. If it doesn't make sense to me, I'll just kind of store it away until something else that, helps that puzzle piece fit. So fast forward to 1991, a friend of mine and I had wanted to get into a river in Skamania County, Washington. That's where I lived at the time. And there had been things going on up that river, up towards the headwaters for a long time. So it took us 5 times to get into that watershed. It was so difficult, the terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a reconnaissance specialist in the Army, so I'm pretty good at map reading, and it took me 5 times to find a way in there. So when we got in there was really nothing to see in the watershed. So we decided to climb this ridge to a saddle that joined that drainage system with another drainage system, and there were a lot of sightings along both of those drainage systems. So our theory was they were using the saddle as a conduit between drainage systems. So we got about 3/4 of the way up that, about the 2,200 foot level, and we stopped, and I saw this, and this is a closed canopy, big Doug fir and spruce trees, middle of July, and I see this young Doug fir that was about 3 inches thick, maybe between 10 and 15 feet tall. And I measured this. It was 8 feet, 1 inches off the ground. It was completely snapped 90 degrees over. And my immediate thought was, how in the world did that happen? So there were no marks on the tree. There was nothing. It was, wind couldn't get in there. There had been no wind. It was middle of July anyway. And then we looked to the northeast about 100 feet or so, and there was another one. Well, we ended up finding 13 of these going in a straight line in that same direction. So I took pictures. I came back, and I showed a friend of mine that was a Klamath Indian. I said, do you know what this is? And he chuckled, and he says, "Oh, you finally found that." I said, "Come on, guy. What is this? What do you mean I found this?" He laughed. He says, "Well, that's how they mark their territory." And he said, "What you found is the big guy of the group telling the rest of them, we're going that way to the next feeding area."
Wow.
So I decided when I wrote my first book, I was going to put that in there because I wanted my name put on it first, since I was the one that really discovered it. It's something that I used to wonder as far as territorial markings. It had to be something in plain sight that we would think is background noise. And sure enough, a broken tree, you see that and you think, wind, if you even consider it.
Absolutely. And then also, I've seen that when we went out looking for Squatch in West Point, Kentucky, and where we were butted up to Fort Knox, actually.
Oh, that's where I went to basic.
Yeah. Oh, was it? Okay. So, we saw stuff there, and actually we saw a creature there one night.
Oh, interesting.
Incredible. I'll never forget it. And then we also heard the screaming as well. That's for another night, but it's so incredible. Robert says, "Thank you for the information." Robert, thank you for listening. It means a lot to me. Linda has a question, and she just says, "What does a Bigfoot feeding area look like? Is it different than their living area?"
The feeding area? Well, typically, and this is funny, when we were in the Three Sisters Wilderness area of Oregon a few years ago, and that's what the first documentary was based on, that area. In fact, it wasn't even supposed to be a documentary, but Adam filmed and made it. But anyhow, I was telling the guys, they're going to follow game animals, and I know where they are. They're pretty aware of how air flows, so they'll stay above. And I learned this when I fought fires many years ago for the Forest Service. We went to the fire academy, and they told us how we had to know how the air moves, so you're not in the line of fire when the air is moving. So I got thinking about some of the stories witnesses told me seeing Sasquatches and where they saw them and what they were doing. And typically what they'll do is they'll stay, because in the morning when the air is warming up, it'll rise up a slope. And then the reverse happens in the evening. So they're going to stay where the animals can't smell them. So I was telling the guys in Oregon, I said, "Okay, now you watch," and we were there right about dusk. I said, "Pretty soon, the deer are going to come from this direction." And I was just kind of, telling him I wasn't expecting it to happen, but it happened on cue. As soon as I said that, here come 3 deer from the exact direction I pointed to. And I said, okay, we need to move out of here because the Sasquatches are going to come following them down, and they're going to wait for them to get to their feeding area. Then they're going to execute their hunt. And we didn't quite get out of there without them screaming. They sort of caught us on the way out, but you have to know what the game animals are doing. Deer have a bedding area, and then they have a feeding area. So the Sasquatches will follow them to their feeding areas, and that's where they'll catch them. There isn't any particular look to it. Like I said, you kind of have to know what game animals are doing. Same with fish and things like that. When the salmon are running in the fall, they're going to be in those places.
Very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense.
That's what we do. It's all common sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's just it. And like you said, not everyone quite sees it that way.
I did want to mention one thing about the structures, though, to back up just a little bit. And this is something we found on the reservation in Arizona. Typically, I didn't think much of structures. I've been all over the West Coast for 50 years. I've never seen any kind of structure whatsoever. Maybe that happens in other parts of the country. I don't know. But I've never seen it in the western half of the U.S. until we went to the Navajo reservation. So we were going out, and the Navajos, the unemployment rate's pretty high there, like 55%, I think we were told. So they'll go out and pick pinyon nuts and sell those. Yep. And they're everywhere. It's really easy to find them. So we would go out and we'd talk to people who were out doing that. So one day we met a family, and they said, well, if you go down to this road, and they told us, and calling it a road is generous. It was little more than a trail. And I pulled my Jeep in, and they said, if you go down about a quarter of a mile, you're going to see this structure. And they said they were down there just a few days prior, and they saw this small, very rudimentary kind of a structure, almost a little more than a lean-to. And they walked up to it, and here's an infant Bigfoot lying in it. And it was awake. It was being motionless. It was looking around. And then Mama came out of the brush, and they all took off for their lives. So they said, if you go down there, you're going to find that. Well, we walked down there, and there was nothing there. And I said, well, everybody judges distance differently. So we walked probably a mile, and then we did come across one. And very rudimentary. And there was the beginnings of a larger one next to it. And then the family told us, oh, well, we misspoke because the original we found was torn apart, which is typically what the creatures do. If they make something, they'll tear it apart, and they all say that's so humans won't find what they've done. But part of that was, I thought, well, why would they do something like that? And the natives there said, well, there was this one particular old one that lived in there, and it ate wild horses, tons of wild horses there. And I thought, well, if you're chasing down a wild horse, you can't have an infant in one arm. So what do you do with the infant?
Right.
You make something and you hide the infant.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that fit.
I want to quickly show you that you won't be able to see it too well, but that's what we ran up against.
Oh, I have a picture from Alberta that's very similar to that.
And this is actually in Indiana.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right?
Yeah, I've got an Okanagan friend that's up in Alberta, and he found something similar to that. Yeah.
And the person we were with said, and I don't know if I believe this, and not that, and I know we got to take a break here, but I don't know if I believe it, and he knows far more about this stuff than I do, but it seems like he says that structure was made to warn other Sasquatch that there's humans that come around the area. I don't know what to think on that.
What I was told by my Indian friend about the broken trees, he said there was a third reason they'll break the trees. Now it's either breaks or twists. Yeah. And I'm not sure what the difference is. I found both, but he says what they'll do when there's an area of a lot of human activity, they'll break those around that area to warn others of their kind that that's a high human activity area.
Sure. Very interesting. And I'm also very happy that what I showed you had seen before. And for those who are listening on the radio, I do apologize. What I showed a picture on the StreamYard stream is basically a a structure that is like 3 or 4 big trees that are bent to almost tie at the top a little bit. Very interesting stuff. William, I need to take a break here. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about the Minnesota Iceman. Folks, you're putting questions into the comments. I love it. Keep it coming. We'll be happy to do that as well. Or you can call in 952-946-6205. You can call 952-946-6205. Don't go anywhere, everyone. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey, bacon, avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com. Greg Bakun here. I've been talking for a while about how spooky, fun, and fascinating the Minneapolis trolley tours are, but now there's big news. The Candlelight Ghost Tours now begin at the historic Pillsbury Club, a beautifully restored haunted mansion once owned by Charles Pillsbury himself. Believe it or not, the interior is nearly 200 years older than the exterior. How is that possible? You'll have to come out and find out. Before or after your tour, stop by the on-site market featuring a curated collection of handmade goods, artisan crafts, and locally inspired treasures. Perfect for picking up a keepsake to remember your haunting adventure. You'll also find exclusive spooky merchandise from Tales of the Crypt and Elvira. Then, climb aboard the climate-controlled trolley as we travel through Minneapolis's haunted hotspots, uncovering ghost stories that locals would rather keep buried. The mansion is restored to perfection, and there is no better way to spend an evening. Visit MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for tickets and more information. Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. It's nice to get out of the Twin Cities and take some travel excursion to some great locations. Minnesota has so much to offer, which is why I love traveling down to Wabasha and staying at the historic Anderson House Hotel. Opened in 1856, this beautiful hotel offers comfortable accommodations, has a delicious restaurant, and even a speakeasy in the basement to unwind with a drink. Located next to the Mississippi River and on Main Street, there is a lot of sightseeing and shopping to do too. To get more information, go to theandersonhousehotel.com. And join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We're going to do a replay from July of last year, where it was just me on the show, and I was talking about my experiences on taking part in a paranormal television show for the Travel Channel. We were going to get a series picked up working with a local production company here in the Twin Cities, and kind of wanted to, because I run into so many paranormal teams who think that that's the pinnacle of doing what they do, is getting their own TV show. And, there's what I have found, and I know other people have found, when you're talking about doing a show, going into buildings and doing paranormal investigations, there are certain things that the networks really want you to do. It's not quite as glamorous as you might think it is. And tomorrow, I'm going to give you a dose of reality with that. It was very well received when we ran it last year. Take a listen to it, especially if you think that that's going to happen. Plus, let alone that sort of thing is less and less, because they're really not making much of that sort of thing anymore. We are talking with William Jevning, author of The Minnesota Iceman, many other books that hopefully, if he enjoyed tonight, that he'll come on back and talk about some of the other subjects as well. William, I do have a question regarding the Minnesota Iceman. Everything now, I mean, because what we sounds like is that the real Iceman is locked away somewhere else, but there has to be equipment now that could scan this entity that didn't exist in the 60s that you could almost do like, I'm not even thinking about cost. Let's even throw that out, but be able to scan and do almost an X-ray of this creature while still in the ice.
Absolutely. Yeah. The question is, you'd have to convince whoever the current owner is to do that, and apparently they're not willing to do it.
Well,
and we don't know who has it.
Well, they don't know who has it. I presume that that's also because not necessarily they think it's a fake, but they don't want to find out it's a fake either, right? I mean, because there's something to it about as long as you don't know, you can't call it a fake.
Right, absolutely. And it's one of those stories. It was a very interesting one, and like you said, it's kind of gone by the wayside. There's a lot of really great stories that have gone by the wayside, and even people. I mean, there's stuff that continually comes to me. I interviewed a lady in Missouri, and where things were going on in her place, and just when I thought I've heard everything, I'm sitting there listening to her. My mouth is hanging open. My jaw could have hit the floor because of the stuff she was telling us. For instance, one of these, and we interviewed her several times, and there's ongoing things happening there. So, but she was telling us about one of her neighbors, and she lives in a really, really small community. And the neighbor was behind her, and there was some in a wooded area. So the neighbor was coming over one day, and she gets knocked down by someone, she thinks. Hits her on the side of the head. She goes down and passes out. She wakes up, and she sees this creature standing over her. And then she passed out again. When she woke up the next time, the creature was crouched down over her and had opened her midsection and was eating her small intestines in front of her.
Oh my God.
And about that time, one of the other people in the area come along with these dogs, scared the creature off. And the lady I interviewed, she said the friend of hers actually showed her the scar. So, I mean, there's just these kind of things come in that are just unbelievable. And that's the thing I always tell people: never go alone. They're not your forest friends. They're wild creatures. Most of the natives I know will absolutely tell you they're man-eaters. In fact, the Navajo, they do one of their ceremonies they do in the fall is directed directly at this, where the women and children hide. They leave the men dress up in costumes of the creatures. And most Navajo words are actually 3 words. And the name for their creatures is Yehito, but it's the first word is Yeti, exactly like the Himalayas. And I was fascinated by that. And he says, yeah, when we were kids, they'd say, well, if you dig too deep in the ground, you'll end up in China. For them, it was they'd end up in Tibet.
Oh, interesting.
So I wondered, well, now what ancient connections are there? There have to be a lot of these really ancient connections. And it just fascinated me, the stuff he was telling us.
Well, and how do those connections even work? I mean, the world's a pretty big place. Yeah, exactly. In the comments, Bruce brings up a really good point that I should have brought up earlier. We kind of covered what part of Minnesota was the Iceman originally from, but if you can answer it again, that's great. But then he also says, are there any known photographs of the Iceman? Which I think is a great question.
The best of my knowledge, it was west of Duluth. And I'd have to go back and look at my notes to see how far it was. I'm pretty sure Hansen said roughly how far it was. It was in a wild area, so I don't think there were any landmarks, but I do know it was west of Duluth. And as far as photographs, there were pictures. In fact, the ones on the cover of my book, those were a couple that were taken. Actually, one of those, I think the one to the right, as you're looking at it, was a drawing, but the one on the left was an actual photograph.
Okay, yeah.
And that was through the ice, so
yeah,
not a perfect picture.
And part of it too is like one of the eyes are protruded outward, right, because of the gunshot and stuff. Yeah. Very so interesting, and the thing is about this is it may very well not be a hoax. I walked into this day thinking that that's what you were going to be talking about, how it became a hoax, but that's not what you believe at all. And it does make me wonder then, like, did we really are we really missing out on an important story in the overall look of cryptids, even
I
if
think
it's may not
so.
be a cryptid, just because of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were too many parallel stories going on, and it made me that's what made me question. I thought, well, now why would there be, the one side that sounds very nuts and bolts, and the other side seems kind of, I don't know. I just didn't. My gut said it was wrong. The ice thing floating around in the ocean, and which would never happen. I mean, the ice block would melt long before it got to the West Coast, and
Right.
those things just didn't make any sense. Then people started contacting me when they knew I was working on that book, and telling me what they saw themselves, and I found that very interesting. It's pretty hard to refute people's eyewitness accounts.
Absolutely, yeah. The whole I thought that too, and I read it regarding the ice in the ocean. That's kind of a very Scooby Doo sort of thing,
It
the
is.
background. Yeah.
Well, that's my thing. As I've always been interested in behavior. In fact, I majored in psychology in college. So, because I question, I was never cared. Green and DeHin and those original guys, they were looking at footprints and all that kind of stuff. And I used to ask them a lot of questions about behavior. And of course, being a 17, 18-year-old, they didn't want to hear anything about behavior. But I had tons of questions. I thought, just like other animals, I hunted and fished. And I thought, well, how do you know anything about an animal unless you know about its behavior? So that's always been the key to my work is I want to know what's going on. Why did they do this?
Which ironically would be what they would do too, to be able to feed, right? They would
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Linda in the comments, kind of getting back to our conversation about Bigfoot in general in the last segment, she mentioned broken or just bent trees because they found that crops found in crop circle designs are bent and are still alive. She wonders if Bigfoot's landmark trees are bent and still alive.
Well, the territorial markings, number one, I find them only in places where they're actively at, and which is interesting. I mean, you don't find them just anywhere. An example of that is when we were in Oregon, we were looking at a real active location, and we decided to go about 30 miles through the forest to another area I wanted to look at. And I told everybody, I said, don't say anything the whole drive. Count how many of these you see along the way. And when we got there, they hadn't seen a single one. Yet we found more at the new location. But as far as being bent and growing, it depends on how much damage there is done to the tree. Because I've seen them bent over and nearly broken, sometimes twisted, and then they continue to grow. Other times they're dead. In fact, most often they're dead, the top part.
Sure. Well, and also, and I wonder, does weather play a part in this? Because we found one in the same area that we found the tree structure, but further away. We found it bent at the base, but it also was raining pretty hard in the area, so that just softens the tree anyway, right?
Yeah, and being from the Pacific Northwest, I was born and raised here, so I'm pretty familiar with what rain does to trees because we get so much of it. And once you know what you're looking for, and that's why, to me, it was something when people came to this part of the world, they saw this stuff, didn't think anything about it because they probably assumed it was weather, or some other, source that did it. Never questioned it. Once I started, once you know what you're looking at, you see it right away. It's never a guess. I can pick out a weather break or lightning or something like that very easily. But these things, they have a particular characteristics to them. So they're not like any other natural breaks. But yeah, absolutely, weather could do that.
Do you find when you feel like that you're near them, that they're in the vicinity, that there is an overwhelming smell? I just remember over at West Point, there was a smell of deep smell of fur and urine.
And we were just talking about that a couple days ago, me and my anthropologist friend and one of the other guys that would do the podcast together. And we talked about it before, but when I talked to John Green originally about smell, because my first encounter, I was, 10 to 15 feet away from the two creatures, and it was calm at dusk. So you would have smelled anything. There was no smell.
Yeah.
And I asked him about that, and he says, well, let me tell you something. The media people, newspapers and such, they picked up on, red eyes and smell and all that. They wanted certain characteristics to kind of hype up their stories a little bit. And he said, to be honest with you, maybe 1 out of 10 witnesses will report a smell.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about that. And now gorillas, for example, have scent glands. And when they get excited, they'll excrete that scent.
Sure.
It's very pungent. And other apes will actually rub nasty smelling things on them. The nastier, the better. So there could be a combination of things. And some of the smells, Tracy, one of our panel members, had a horrific sighting about 2012, where he was literally, inches away from this creature's face, and ended up urinating on its feet without him knowing about it. And we teased him about that. But he said afterwards, his truck smelled like kind of like urine and wet dog.
Yes.
So, there's got to be a combination of things. I mean, they're not going to be the neatest creatures. I'm sure they probably get stuff on their hair.
Yep.
And again, if they're using a scent gland, I've only smelled something one time. And I think it was because we came up on the creature without it knowing that we were coming. We were pretty quiet. It was raining, and we walked into a wall of stink that it almost made us throw up. It was so bad. We had to walk out of it immediately. And I told my friend, I said, let me check something. So I walked right back there about 100 feet, and it was gone. And then we did a search of the area, and inside the tree line near where we were, I found a bunch of moss that had been flattened down. And it takes quite a bit of weight to flatten that moss down. So there was one there. When we were there because of a recent sighting too. So it just depends. It depends if it's hair, something on the creature, or if it's emitting a scent.
It's absolutely fascinating, and I'm so glad, because I've gone through a few of those things myself. Folks, if you haven't done so, please visit jevningresearchgroup.com. The book we're talking about tonight is The Minnesota Iceman, but there are so many other books that William has written. William, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you very much. We'll be back tomorrow about paranormal television. Everyone, have a great night.